So your name is Jade as J.A.D. McMillan? I had to spell that a few times.
Away from the rest of them. Annalise. Let's go closer.
Just getting the shots, okay?
Australia and the US are the closest of friends and the closest of allies. And of course that kind of relationship should be built on mutual trust and mutual respect. And it was a good start that we had a meeting today with the Department of Justice as a cross-party Australian delegation. I'm not going to say much except to say that we feel like we had a fair hearing and we had productive discussions. And I might see if any of my colleagues want to add anything to that.
Thank you. We're here in Washington. Can I start by making this observation? The Statue of Liberty is a beacon of US values, of justice, freedom and friendship. We are here from Australia as friends of the US. And we are here because we also believe strongly in those values. Values which right now have shown that Julian Assange, an Australian citizen, has been effectively deprived of his liberty for the last 11 years. And we're here to speak to the US government and to make it very clear that the people of Australia believe that Julian Assange has been punished enough, that his detention should come to an end, that the charges against him should be dropped. And our discussions with the Department of Justice right now and with others in Washington have enabled us to put that view very clearly and very strongly. We've done that, and we've certainly been given the opportunity and a very fair hearing of all the people who have spoken here today.
For the non-Australian press, could you identify yourselves, please?
First of all, I'd like to thank the Department of Justice for the time that they've given us. As Senator Wilson said, we had a fair hearing. Obviously, justice comes from a fair oversight of the facts, and Australians believe in fair go. And we want to make sure that people clearly understand we did not come here to pick a fight. We came here to present a case and to lobby for an outcome. And this is part of the process of making sure that people are aware of all the facts and as wide of facts as we also have grown to know over a number of years. So the delegation has come from every corner of the political spectrum, but we've arrived in Washington at the one spot, and that is after 11 years, enough is enough.
This has been a unique delegation from the Australian Parliament. Literally all sides of politics have come together and united on this one key message, which is that an Australian citizen, Julian Assange, should come home. The only crime that we see that the Julian Assange has been charged with is the crime of being a journalist, the crime of telling the truth. And the fact that it's an Australian citizen that has been targeted by one of our closest friends and allies is a very real concern to us as politicians and to a growing part of the Australian public. More than 85% of the Australian public, close to 90% of the Australian public, say that Julian Assange should come home. This is an ongoing irritant in the bilateral relationship. We've had productive meetings with the administration and with members of Congress. And we've made it very clear in each of those meetings that there is a growing political consensus in Australia that Julian Assange should be home for Christmas with his 2 children and his wife. This has gone on more than long enough, and we have made that clear. The growing unity in the Australian people, the growing unity in the Australian Parliament, that Julian Assange should come home.
Thanks for that. Yeah, sorry, Senator Alex Anthony, Senator for South Australia. Look, I'm here today as one of what you would describe as being the most broad political alliance in probably in my time in watching politics in Australia and being involved in politics in Australia. We've got people here representing the right, the left and everything in between, and that really does showcase what we're seeing now, which is a growing consensus in Australia. 9 out of 10 Australians, it is reported now, believe that Julian should come home. There are many of us who agree with that, and we're here in Washington DC to get that message conveyed to the American government. I want to thank all of you for your interest in the matter, and thank the colleagues for the incredible way in which people have come together across the political spectrum. We may not agree on almost anything else in politics other than this one issue, and it is an enormous effort. We've seen 67 members of the Australian Parliament share that message in a joint letter, which we've delivered across the spectrum as well today. I don't think that's ever happened before. I think we're seeing an incredible groundswell. We want to see Julian home as soon as possible.
I'll just have one comment. One thing to you as I one thing that we have a very strong, clear message that we have been delivering to decision makers, politicians, government here in the US is that the extradition of Julian Assange as a journalist and as a foreign journalist who is conducting activities on foreign soils is a precedent. In fact, the US hasn't tried to extradite a journalist before, nor have they used the current legal system that's... nor have we seen them use the Espionage Act before to pursue any journalist. This is a very troubling precedent, not just for us in Australia, but for everyone in the world. And of course, we're very excited about being here. Clearly the capital of democracy around the world, the beacon to democracy, and we've just been highlighting that this is a very dangerous precedent, a very slippery slope for any democracy to go down.
Could you tell us anything about who you met with in the Department of Justice and what you about
Throughout the day, we've had several meetings, and we're not going to go into the details of those meetings. But I can say that they've all been useful meetings. They've enabled us, as representatives of both the Parliament and the Australian people, to make and put our case very clearly about the fact that Julian Assange pursuit and detention and charges should be dropped and should come to an end. Well, I feel more optimistic every day because the fact of the matter is that ever since this commenced over a decade ago, I've seen a shift in public opinion, not only in the Parliament, but throughout the Australian community and across the world. And as a result of that shift in opinion throughout the world, I'm feeling very confident that we can put this matter to an end.
The US does not change its position on Australia. What does that say about Australia's level of influence in Washington, given that we're meant to be one of Australia?
That's a hypothetical question. And my view is that we will deal with the process as the way we have been. I'm sure that at diplomatic levels these issues are also being discussed, and I'm hoping that when Prime Minister Anthony Albanese comes here next month, perhaps there will be another opportunity to raise the matter.
Given we're a delegation and we have different views, we might have
if this matter is not resolved and Julian is not brought home, it will be damaging to the bilateral relationship. When you have such an overwhelming part of the Australian public demanding Julian come home, and when that can't be delivered from a relationship that is as close as that between Australia and the United States, well, that is embarrassing for the Australian Prime Minister and the Australian government, and it's damaging to the relationship. Sometimes it is very hard to be a friend of the United States, when the United States is prosecuting an Australian citizen for basically being a journalist, it's very hard to be a friend of the United States. We all came here in the spirit of friendship. As Barnaby has said, we didn't come here to pick a fight. We came here to solve a problem, and that can only be solved by Julian Assange coming home.
Look, I am continuing that we want a success for us. Let's take the word Julian Assange out. Let's just say an Australian citizen. An Australian citizen who was not in the United States when an offence was committed in the United States, was in Australia, has never been convicted of a crime in Australia. To go, the issue of extraterritoriality is, think of it as your son, your daughter, your brother. If at one stage of Australia they never committed a crime in the United States, but then they end up possibly going to the United States for 175 years in jail, you would want a delegation to turn up. And we have arrived. Now I know little about lots about politics, and I do not want to put any of duress or precedent on people. I want them to think about it in a compassionate, logical form, for which success of this delegation is not to score a point, it's for this Australian citizen to come up. And isn't that what everybody wants to do? Don't you just want to go home after a while? Isn't enough and it's just time to get back to where you belong?
All we can say at the moment is that we feel like we've had a fair hearing, and that's a good start. That we've seen that level of respect that we've actually been up to meet senior officials, senators, Congress, and we've had a hearing. And I can say that I've been on this issue now for many years, and I'm feeling optimistic from our meetings. So I do feel there are cogs turning and the wheels are moving, and I feel optimistic that we'll get a resolution and Julian will be home with his family.
With all due respect, gentlemen, was an effort such as this made towards the British government that's been holding him for 4 years, torturing him in a high security prison for terrorists, a journalist, a publisher? Where was the effort towards the government that you're still part of as a Commonwealth nation?
It's a really good question, and it's been something that we've discussed as a delegation, including in our meetings. A number of Australian parliamentarians have gone to the UK. In fact, I'll hand over to David because he's tried to go to Belmarsh to meet with Julian and do exactly this.
It's clearly the view of the friends of Julian Assange across Parliament that Julian should be brought home. One of the reasons we're here is we're in the shadow of extradition proceedings in the United Kingdom. And of course, if the appeal is not successful, there will ultimately be a political decision for the UK government about whether the extradition proceeds. And the arguments we make here in Washington are the same arguments we'd make in London, that this should not happen and that Julian Assange should be brought home.
And I think it's fair to say that an easy resolution for this, where nobody loses face, is for the UK government to simply say no, because ultimately the final decision will be by the Attorney General or potentially the Prime Minister, and it will be a political decision. And remember, the judge has already ruled that Julian Assange previously was unfit to be sent to the US based on the fact that he had mental health issues and was suicidal. The UK government could make this easy for everyone.
Thanks, guys. Thank you very much for turning up, guys. Really appreciate that. Good of you. Thank you. Oh, yeah. See you later.
One of our key pillars is peace and development. And I think Helen's work is going to help.
And that's ultimately a global problem to see.
Well, here we are.
Ultimately global solutions. So nice to see you.
All members of U.S. Greens in D.C. were calling for statehood.
Yeah, you kind of sometimes feel like you're out there too. Where are your senators?
That's right. You know what? You know Robert Kennedy has promised to pardon.
Yeah, I've seen.
Yeah. All right.
Yes, exactly.
So they do it.
Okay, so I apologize. I know that the audio on that was probably pretty bad for the live stream just because it came out of the phone and they didn't really speak up or use anything to project it. So my apologies about that, but the good sound, the higher quality audio will, of course, be on it when I upload it to YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter later tonight. So if you're hoping to sort of hear better everything that was just said, then you can certainly tune into that when I get it up later tonight. But just as a quick summary, I believe it was 7 Australian members of parliament that actually met today inside the Department of Justice building here, alongside Julian Assange's brother, that's Gabriel Shipman, who's right behind me there, with Biden administration officials inside the DOJ. And what's interesting, of course, about that coalition is that this delegation, I should say, is that this delegation is a coalition of essentially every Australian party. They have members of, my understanding, is the Labour Party, Green Party, as well as, I believe it's called the Conservative Party here, or it might be called the Liberal Party, but sort of different from the American definition of liberal. In any event, essentially all wings of sort of the Australian Parliament had representation here, speaking to Biden or the Biden administration, and putting pressure on him to free Julian Assange. As they put it, one of them said that it would really stress relations between Australia and the United States. They described it as it's sometimes hard to be friends with the United States because of situations like that. So with that, I will probably be conducting another interview or two, but I'm going to cut the live feed here, and you'll have to watch that on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter